I'm Maggie Harper, 68, a widow who clawed her way from a crumbling Napa Valley inn to a $33 million hotel empire. But 3 weeks ago, my daughter, my only daughter, Emily sent a text that tore my soul apart. "Mom, don't come to my wedding. You don't fit our vision." My hands shook, clutching James's silver watch, its ticking mocking my breaking heart. She didn't just reject me, she erased me, oblivious that I owned the hotel she chose for her so-called perfect day. And what I did next? It burned brighter than my pain. My heart was still pounding from Emily's text, her words like shards of glass. "You don't fit our vision." I'm Maggie Harper, and for 40 years, I poured my soul into building Harper Estates, a $33 million luxury hotel chain that dots the rolling hills of Napa Valley. It started with a single, crumbling inn in Sonoma, where my late husband, James, and I scrubbed floors and dreamed big. We turned that shack into a haven for presidents, celebrities, and yes, dream weddings. But none of that mattered when my only daughter, Emily, decided I was a flaw in her perfect picture. I sat in my kitchen, the Napa sunrise spilling through the window, glinting off James's silver wedding ring on my finger, engraved with "Forever Steady." Emily's dismissal wasn't new. At her engagement party, she'd rolled her eyes when I offered her grandmother's pearl earrings, muttering, "Mom, they're too old-fashioned." Her fiancé Ryan just smirked, calling me Mags like I was some distant aunt. They wanted my $50,000 check for their wedding at Harper Estates' crown jewel, the vineyard crest, but not me, not my history, not my heart. I called Olivia, the wedding planner. "Maggie, the deposit's in," she chirped, oblivious. "They're upgrading to a string quartet." My voice didn't waver. "Cancel it all," I said. "The venue, the suites, the catering, everything." Silence. "But ma'am," she stammered, "I'm the owner." I cut in, cold as steel. "Do it." I hung up, my hand steady on the ring, but inside, a storm raged. Emily thought she could erase me. She didn't know the ground she stood on was mine. As I stared out at the vineyard, memories of James flooded back, his calloused hands fixing that old inn, his quiet promise to build something lasting. I'd kept that promise, even after he was gone. Now, Emily's betrayal was unraveling it all. But I wasn't done yet. The Napa sunrise faded, leaving me alone with James's silver ring. Its "Forever Steady" engraving pressing into my palm like a heartbeat. I'm Maggie Harper, and for decades, I built Harper Estates with my late husband, James, turning a dilapidated Sonoma inn into a $33 million empire of luxury hotels. But as I sat in my quiet kitchen, Emily's text, "Mom, please don't come to my wedding," burned deeper than any wound I'd ever known. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure, as if every sacrifice I'd made for her was dust in her curated world. I closed my eyes, and the past came rushing back, vivid as the Napa vines outside my window. 40 years ago, I was 22, a small-town girl working the front desk at a rundown inn off Highway 29. The roof leaked, the carpet smelled of mildew, and I was saving every penny for a bus ticket out. Then James walked in, toolbox in one hand, ledger in the other, his hazel eyes steady as oak. "This place could be something," he said, "not just about the inn, but about us." We married in a vineyard under a July sky, barefoot, with wildflowers tucked into my braid. He promised me a life where love would outlast the seasons, and we built it, room by room, dream by dream. By the time Emily was born, we had 3 properties, each one a piece of our heart. I'd wake at 4 a.m. to balance budgets while James hammered nails into dawn. We weren't chasing wealth. We were crafting spaces where people could feel seen: weddings, reunions, moments that mattered. Emily grew up in those hotels, toddling through lobbies, giggling as I taught her to fold napkins into swans. I remember her at 6, her tiny hands clutching my skirt, whispering, "Mommy." will you dance with me at my wedding someday? I promised I would, my heart swelling like the tide. But the years shifted something in her. By college, Emily started drifting, drawn to the glitter of Napa's elite. She'd come home from Berkeley, her laughter sharper, her eyes scanning my simple dresses with a flicker of disdain. "Mom, you're so vintage," she'd say, half joking, half cutting. I brushed it off, thinking it was just youth, just a phase. Then she met Ryan, a finance bro with a slick smile and a family obsessed with status. At their engagement party at a Napa vineyard, his mother, Charlotte, sized me up, her lips curling as she said, "You're more rustic than I expected." Emily laughed along, and I felt a crack form, small but real, in the foundation we'd built. I tried to hold on. When Emily called, frantic about wedding costs, I wired $50,000 to Olivia, the planner, without a second thought. When she agonized over dresses, I drove 60 miles to San Francisco to help her choose, my hands steady as I pinned her veil. "You always know how to fix things, Mom," she said once, her voice soft, like the girl who'd clung to me during thunderstorms. But those moments faded. At a dinner last spring, she interrupted me mid-sentence to talk about floral arches, and Ryan called me Mags again, his tone dripping with dismissal. I offered her grandmother's pearl earrings hand-me-downs from my mother, worn at my own wedding, and Emily sighed. "They're not my style, Mom. Too old school." That night, alone in my Napa cottage, I opened the wooden box where I kept my mother's silk scarf, its edges frayed but soft as memory. It smelled of lavender and thyme, a relic of the woman who taught me to stand tall, even when the world looked away. I'd planned to give it to Emily for her wedding, a piece of our lineage to carry down the aisle. But she didn't want it. She didn't want me. Her text wasn't just a refusal, it was a declaration that I, Maggie Harper, the woman who'd built her world, was an inconvenience to her vision. As I sat there, the weight of that truth settled like fog over the valley. I'd given Emily everything, my time, my love, my legacy, only to be told I didn't belong. But I wasn't just a mother. I was the woman who'd turned a leaking inn into Harper Estates, who'd signed every contract, who'd kept James's dream alive after his heart gave out 3 winters ago. I clutched the scarf, my resolve hardening. Emily thought she could rewrite me out of her story. She didn't know I held the pen. The Napa morning was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest like a stone. I'm Maggie Harper, and I just told Olivia, the wedding planner, to cancel every detail of Emily's wedding at my vineyard crest, my hotel, my legacy. My heart poured into every brick. Her text still burned in my mind. "Mom, please don't come. You're not the right fit for our vision." Each word was a blade, sharpened by years of small dismissals. And now, I'd drawn a line of my own, but the real wound came later that afternoon, when an email landed in my inbox, forwarded by Olivia with a hesitant note. "Maggie, I thought you should see this." I opened it, my breath catching. It was from Emily, sent to Olivia, clinical and cold as a corporate memo. "Please ensure Margaret Harper is not permitted at the venue," it read. "Her presence would disrupt our aesthetic and create unnecessary tension. Thank you for your discretion." Disrupt. Aesthetic. The words stung like salt in an open cut. My daughter, the girl I'd rocked through fevers and driven through storms, had reduced me to a liability, a smudge on her polished Napa dream. I sat at my kitchen table, James's silver ring glinting under the light, its "forever steady" engraving mocking the fracture in my soul. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but something inside me hardened, like steel forged in fire. I drove 30 miles to the San Francisco office of my lawyer, Susan, a woman who'd stood by James and me through every contract, every expansion of Harper Estates. The city buzzed outside, but inside her office, time slowed. I handed her the email printout, my hands steady but my voice low. "Susan, I need you to draft cancellation orders for the Vineyard Crest, the guest suites, and the catering, all of it." She read the email, her eyes narrowing. "Maggie, this is cruel," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "Are you sure?" I nodded, tracing the ring on my finger. "I'm not funding a celebration that bans me from its doors." Susan pulled out James's old Mont Blanc pen from a velvet case, the one he'd used to sign our first hotel deed. "He'd want you to use this," she said, sliding it across the desk. I took it, the weight familiar, grounding. One by one, I signed the termination papers for the Vineyard Crest's grand ballroom, its marble floors polished to mirror the Napa stars. For the 150 guest suites, each with linens I'd chosen. For the catering, a menu I'd helped refine when Emily panicked over choices. Each signature was a quiet act of reclamation, not revenge. "No press, no drama," I told Susan. "Just make it clean." She nodded, her gaze steady. "It's done, Maggie. They'll feel this." By evening, the ripples began. Olivia called, her voice trembling. "Maggie, I've informed the vendors. The florist is out, the quartet canceled, and the caterers pulling their staff. Emily's team is scrambling." I didn't respond, just let the silence speak. Then Ryan called, his voice tight with confusion. "Mrs. Harper, there's been a mistake. The venue's canceled. The rooms, everything. Did you know about this?" I paused, the Napa wind whistling through my open window. "Ryan," I said, calm as stone. "I didn't just know. I own it. All of it." There was a long silence, then a faint, "Oh." He hung up, and I knew the ground had shifted beneath him. I stood on my porch, the valley stretching before me, its vines heavy with late-season grapes. Emily had built her wedding on my foundation, my money, my love, only to cast me out like a stranger. But she didn't know the power I held, not just over Harper Estates, but over myself. I'd spent decades building spaces for joy, for love, for beginnings, and she'd turned me into an outcast. The pain was raw, but so was my resolve. I thought of James, his voice steady in my memory. "Maggie, protect what we built. Not for pride, but for truth." I was doing just that, but the truth was about to cut deeper. As I walked back inside, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Emily's best friend, Claire, her voice shaking. "Maggie, I found something you need to know. It's worse than the email." My heart sank, knowing whatever came next would test the strength I'd just reclaimed. The Napa dusk settled like ash, heavy and gray, as I stood frozen in my kitchen, Claire's voicemail echoing in my ears. "Maggie, it's worse than the email," she'd said, her voice cracking like thin ice. "I'm Maggie Harper, the woman who built Harper Estates, a $33 million hotel empire, from a crumbling Sonoma Inn alongside my late husband, James. But no amount of wealth could shield me from the wound. Emily, my only daughter, had carved with her text, 'Mom, please don't come to my wedding. You're not the right fit for our vision.' The email she sent to Olivia, the wedding planner, banning me as a disruption, had already sliced deep. Now, Claire's words promised a pain I couldn't yet fathom. I pressed play again, my hand trembling on James's silver ring, its forever steady, engraving biting into my skin. Claire's voice was a whisper, urgent and raw. "Maggie, I overheard Emily at the bridal fitting. She told Ryan's mother, Charlotte, that you'd embarrass them, that your small-town widow vibe would ruin their photos." She laughed, Maggie. She laughed when Charlotte said you'd look out of place in their elegant narrative. My knees buckled, and I sank into the chair where I'd once held Emily as a child, her fevered head against my chest. The room spun, the Napa hills outside blurring into a haze. My daughter, the girl I'd driven 100 miles through a storm to deliver a prom dress, had mocked me, reduced me to a punchline in her curated world. I clutched the ring, its edges sharp, as if it could anchor me against the flood. I stumbled upstairs to Emily's old bedroom, untouched since she left for college. The walls still held her teenage dreams posters of Napa vineyards, a faded Polaroid of us at a county fair, her smile wide as she held my hand. On the dresser was a letter she'd written at 12, folded in pink stationery, promising, "Mom, you'll be the heart of my wedding someday." I'd kept it in a cedar box, next to my mother's silk scarf, believing it was a vow we'd both honor. Now, it felt like a lie, each word a shard of glass. I read it again, my voice breaking as I whispered, "Did I fail you, Emily? Or did you fail me?" The question hung unanswered, heavy as the Napa fog. I looked in the mirror, my silver hair catching the dim light, my face etched with lines from years of love and loss. I saw a woman who'd built an empire, who'd stayed up nights balancing budgets, who'd held James's hand as he took his last breath 3 winters ago. But Emily didn't see that woman. She saw a relic, a small-town widow, who didn't fit her Instagram, perfect aesthetic. The pain was a physical thing, clawing at my chest, deeper than the email, deeper than the text. It wasn't just that she'd uninvited me, it was that she'd laughed, as if my existence was a joke to be shared with Charlotte, a woman who'd dismissed me as rustic at their engagement party. I sank onto Emily's old bed, the letter crumpling in my fist. Memories flooded in, unbidden. The night she called from Berkeley, sobbing over a broken heart, and I flew 500 miles to sit with her, no questions asked. The time I shoveled snow off her dorm steps at 2 a.m., my hands numb, just to bring her soup. I'd been her rock, her safe place, and now I was nothing a shadow she'd erased to please a family obsessed with appearances. "Why, Emily?" I whispered to the empty room. "When did I become your shame?" The silence answered, louder than any scream. And for the first time I felt truly invisible, a ghost in the life I'd built for her. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood, smoothing the letter as if it could hold the pieces of me together. I placed it back in the cedar box, next to the scarf, and closed the lid. But the pain lingered, a weight I couldn't shake. As I walked downstairs, my phone buzzed again. It was Susan, my lawyer, her voice steady but urgent. "Maggie, Emily's coming to see you. She knows about the cancellations. Brace yourself." My heart tightened, not with hope, but with dread. The girl who'd laughed at my expense was about to face the mother she'd tried to erase. The Napa evening air was thick with the scent of eucalyptus. But inside my cottage, the silence was heavier, pressing against me like a storm about to break. I'm Maggie Harper, the woman who built Harper Estates, a $33 million hotel empire, from a crumbling Sonoma inn with my late husband, James. His silver ring, engraved with "Forever Steady," sat cold on my finger as I braced for Emily's arrival. Susan's warning echoed. My daughter, who'd banished me from her wedding with a text, "Mom, please don't come. You're not the right fit for our vision," and mocked me as a small-town widow to her fiancé's mother, Charlotte, was coming to confront me. The email she'd sent to Olivia, the wedding planner, labeling me a disruption, had already carved a wound deeper than I thought possible. Now, with the vineyard crest, guest suites, and catering canceled by my hand, Emily was about to face the consequences of her choices. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet like a blade. I opened the door to find Emily, her eyes red-rimmed, her perfect Napa polish fraying at the edges. Her blonde hair, usually sleek, was pulled into a messy bun, and her designer coat hung loose, as if she'd thrown it on in a rush. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling but edged with defiance. "How could you do this? You canceled everything, the venue, the rooms, the food. You're ruining my wedding." Her words hit like a slap, but I stood still, my gaze steady, the ring on my finger grounding me. "Emily," I said, my voice low, cutting through her outburst like a knife through silk. "You didn't just uninvite me, you erased me. You told Olivia I'd disrupt your aesthetic. You laughed with Charlotte about my widow vibe, and now you're here demanding I fix what you broke?" Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting away. "I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, stepping inside, her heels clicking on my hardwood floor. It was just the pressure, Mom. Ryan's family, they're so particular, and I just wanted everything to be perfect. Perfect? I repeated, my voice steady but laced with pain. You used my money, $50,000 of it, to build your perfect day, but I wasn't good enough to be part of it. You mocked me, Emily. You laughed. Her face crumpled, tears spilling, but I saw the flicker of defiance still there. You always make it about you, she snapped, her voice rising. You paid for everything, sure, but it's like you wanted control. You picked the venue, the menu, even suggested my dress. I just wanted one day that was mine. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers, the weight of 40 years building Harper Estates, raising her, burying James, fueling my words. Control? I said, my voice a quiet storm. I paid because you were drowning in choices. I suggested the dress because you sent me photos begging for help. I gave you everything, Emily, not to own you, but because I loved you. And you repaid me with a text and an email that called me a disruption. I reached into the cedar box on the side table, pulling out my mother's silk scarf. Its lavender scent faint but piercing. This was for you, I said, holding it out. For your wedding day, a piece of your grandmother, of me. But you chose a vision that didn't include us. Emily stared at the scarf, her hands shaking, but she didn't take it. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking, but her eyes still held a spark of self-justification. I didn't want drama. I thought you wouldn't fit with Ryan's family. Can't you just fix this? Reinstate the contracts? Please, Mom. It's my wedding. Her plea was raw, but it rang hollow like a bell cracked at its core. I shook my head, my resolve unyielding. You made a choice, Emily. You chose their approval over me. I won't fund a lie that leaves me out in the cold. She stood frozen, tears streaming, but no apology followed, no real reckoning. She turned and left, the door closing with a soft thud that echoed louder than her words. I stood alone, the scarf still in my hands, its frayed edges brushing my skin like a whisper of the past. The pain was sharp, but so was my clarity. I'd built Harper Estates with love, not control, and I wouldn't let it be twisted into a prop for Emily's vanity. As I set the scarf back in the box, my phone buzzed a text from Susan. Maggie, the vendors are out. The wedding's unraveling. But there's something else. Emily's planning to call you again. My heart tightened, not with hope, but with the weight of what might come next. The Napa night was still, the stars above my cottage glinting like scattered coins, but inside, my heart churned with the aftershock of Emily's visit. I'm Maggie Harper, the woman who turned a crumbling Sonoma Inn into Harper Estates, a $33 million hotel empire, alongside my late husband James. His silver ring, engraved with Forever Steady, anchored my finger as I sat in the quiet, Emily's tearful plea, Mom, fix this, still ringing in my ears. She'd stood in my kitchen, begging me to reinstate the wedding contracts I'd canceled after her text. Mom, please don't come. You're not the right fit for our vision. Her email to Olivia, the planner, calling me a disruption, and her cruel laughter with Ryan's mother, Charlotte, about my small-town widow vibe, had cut deeper than I could bear. I'd held out my mother's silk scarf, a wedding gift she'd rejected, and sent her away. My resolve as firm as the Napa Hills. But now, a new weight settled over me, heavier than anger, sharper than pain. The next morning, I walked to my mailbox, the Napa air crisp with the promise of fall. Among the bills was a plain envelope, no return address, just my name in Emily's slanted handwriting. My breath caught, the ring on my finger suddenly heavy. I tore it open, and a postcard slipped out, a watercolor of a Pacific sunset, soft oranges bleeding into blue. On the back, 6 words. Her name is Sophia. Please meet her. Tucked inside was a photo, 2 by 3 inches, of a baby girl swaddled in a cream blanket, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. Her eyes, James's eyes, warm brown like autumn leaves, stared up at me, steady and clear. My knees weakened, and I sank onto the porch steps, the postcard trembling in my hands. Sophia, my granddaughter. A name that felt like a bridge, fragile but real, stretching across the chasm Emily had carved. I carried the photo inside, my heart a tangle of joy and grief. I set it on the kitchen table, next to James's ring, and traced the edges of Sophia's face. She was a piece of him, of me, of the love we'd poured into Harper Estates, into Emily. But the words on the postcard, "Please meet her," were a plea, not an apology. Emily hadn't said, "I'm sorry." She hadn't owned the text, the email, the laughter that had mocked my existence. I closed my eyes, picturing James in our old vineyard, his voice steady. "Maggie, love holds steady, but it doesn't bend for pride." I wanted to call her, to hold Sophia, to feel the weight of new life in my arms. But another voice, my own, whispered, "Not yet. Not until you're whole." I walked to the vineyard crest that afternoon, the flagship of Harper Estates, its stone arches glowing under the Napa Sunday. In the garden, where roses climbed trellises, I made a decision. I met with my manager, Clara, a woman who'd worked with me since our first hotel. "I want to name a space here," I said, my voice firm but soft. "Sophia's Garden. A corner for families, for beginnings. Build a bench, a small fountain, something simple but lasting." Clara's eyes softened. "For your granddaughter?" she asked. I nodded, the photo in my pocket pressing against my heart. "It's not forgiveness," I said. "It's a door I'm leaving open. But I'm not stepping through it yet." That night, I sat at James's old oak desk, the one where he'd sketched plans for our first inn. I pulled out a sheet of cream stationery and wrote, "Emily, I see Sophia's eyes, and they're your father's. I'll love her always, but love doesn't erase truth. You chose to exclude me, and I choose to protect myself. Sophia's Garden will wait for her, but I'm not ready to meet you yet." I folded the letter, sealed it with wax, but didn't send it. Instead, I slipped it into the cedar box beside my mother's scarf, a promise to myself that forgiveness would come on my terms, not hers. As I stood, the phone buzzed Olivia, the planner, her voice hushed. "Maggie, the wedding's falling apart. Vendors are gone, guests are canceling, and Ryan's asking questions about Emily's choices. It's chaos." I looked at Sophia's photo, her eyes steady like James's, and felt a pang not of triumph, but of sorrow for the daughter who'd lost her way. The ground was shifting, and Emily was about to learn what happens when you build a dream on borrowed foundations. The Napa dawn broke soft and golden, but its warmth couldn't touch the ache in my chest. I'm Maggie Harper, the woman who built Harper Estates, a $33 million hotel empire, from a crumbling Sonoma inn with my late husband, James. His silver ring, engraved with "Forever Steady," gleamed on my finger, a quiet anchor as I stood in the shadow of Emily's choices. Her text, "Mom, please don't come. You're not the right fit for our vision." And her email to Olivia, the wedding planner, branding me a disruption, had shattered me. Her cruel laughter with Ryan's mother, Charlotte, about my small-town widow vibe, and her desperate plea in my kitchen to reinstate the wedding I'd canceled, had hardened my resolve. The postcard with Sophia's photo, my granddaughter's brown eyes staring back like James's, had offered a fragile hope, but I'd chosen to hold my ground, naming a corner of the vineyard crest, Sophia's Garden, as a promise, not a surrender. Now, the consequences of Emily's actions were unfolding, and the weight of truth was heavier than I'd imagined. Word traveled fast in Napa's tight-knit circles. Olivia's call had warned me. The wedding was unraveling. By noon, I heard from Clara, my manager at the Vineyard Crest, her voice low over the phone. "Maggie, it's a mess. They moved the wedding to a community hall on the edge of town, some 2 000 square foot box with peeling paint and fluorescent lights. No chandeliers, no roses, just folding chairs and a borrowed speaker that hums like a dying fridge. I stood on my porch, the Napa vines stretching before me, and pictured Emily's dream, the grand ballroom, the string quartet, the $50,000 I'd paid reduced to a hollow stage. Only 20 guests showed up, Clara continued. Most canceled when the vendors pulled out. The florist sent a single bouquet, half wilted, as a courtesy. No music, no catering. Just a grocery store cake on a plastic table. I closed my eyes, the ring pressing into my palm. I didn't feel triumph, only a deep, aching sorrow. Emily had wanted a perfect wedding, a curated masterpiece to impress Ryan's status-obsessed family. Instead, she'd gotten a shadow of her vision, a ceremony stripped bare by her own choices. Clara's voice softened. "Maggie," I heard Ryan's pulling away. He was seen arguing with Emily outside the hall, asking why she never told him you owned Harper Estates. He looked betrayed. My heart tightened, not for Emily's loss, but for the girl I'd raised, who'd traded love for appearances and now faced the cost. Later, I walked through the vineyard crest, its marble floors gleaming under the Napa sun. I stopped at the site of Sophia's garden, where workers were laying stones for a small fountain. I'd added a dignity clause to all Harper Estates contracts, requiring clients to respect every stakeholder, a rule born from Emily's betrayal. "It's a legacy move," I told Clara, my voice steady but heavy. "No one should feel erased in a place built for celebration." She nodded, her eyes warm. "James would be proud, Maggie. This is your strength, not just his." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, Sophia's photo beside me, her eyes a mirror of James's quiet courage. I thought of the charity event I'd planned at the Vineyard Crest, raising funds for Napa's foster children. Kids who, like Emily once, needed someone to show up. I'd poured my pain into purpose, channeling the $50,000 I'd reclaimed into scholarships, ensuring no child would feel invisible. But the weight of Emily's choices lingered. A text from Susan, my lawyer, buzzed through. Maggie, Ryan's mother, Charlotte, confronted Emily publicly. Said she'd brought shame to their family by hiding your role. Emily's spiraling. She posted a photo on Instagram, captioned, "Still love." But the comments are brutal people asking if you really owned the venue. Very heaven. I didn't check the post. I didn't need to. The Napa gossip mill was already churning, with bridal blogs whispering about the wedding that never was. Emily's carefully crafted image was crumbling, not because I'd shouted, but because I'd stepped back. James's voice echoed in my memory. "Truth doesn't need a megaphone, Maggie. It just needs room to breathe." I'd given it that room, and now the world was speaking for me. But the sorrow cut deep not for the wedding's failure, but for the daughter who'd chosen vanity over family, who'd learned her lesson in the hardest way. As I set Sophia's photo in a small silver frame, my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Emily, her voice trembling, barely audible. "Mom, I need to talk, please." I didn't play it again. Not yet. The wound was still raw, and I needed time before facing her voice. I stood, walking to the window, the Napa stars bright above. The truth had shifted everything, but a new chapter was coming, one I'd face on my own terms. As I set Sophia's photo in a small silver frame, my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Emily, her voice trembling, barely audible. "Mom, I need to talk. Please." I didn't play it again. Not yet. The wound was still raw, and I needed time before facing her voice. I stood, walking to the window, the Napa stars bright above. The truth had shifted everything, but a new chapter was coming, one I'd face on my own terms. The Napa twilight draped my cottage in a soft hush, the kind that carries both endings and beginnings. I'm Maggie Harper, the woman who built Harper Estates, a $33 million hotel empire, from a crumbling Sonoma inn with my late husband, James. His silver ring, engraved with forever steady, rested on my finger, a quiet reminder of the love we'd woven into every stone of our legacy. Emily's text. Mom, please don't come. You're not the right fit for our vision. And her email calling me a disruption had shattered my heart. Her laughter with Ryan's mother, Charlotte, about my small-town widow vibe, and her desperate plea to reinstate the wedding I'd canceled, had tested my resolve. The postcard of my granddaughter, Sophia, with James's warm brown eyes, had offered a fragile hope. But I'd chosen dignity over haste, naming a corner of the vineyard crest Sophia's Garden, as a promise to the future, not a surrender to the past. Now, as the dust settled, I stood in that garden, its new fountain whispering under the stars. I set a small porcelain cup on the stone table, its delicate rim chipped but steady, next to Sophia's framed photo. It was a place for her, for possibility, for a door left ajar. I'd rebuilt Harper Estates with a dignity clause, ensuring no one would feel erased in spaces meant for joy. The charity event for Napa's foster children had raised $50,000, turning my pain into purpose. Emily's wedding had crumbled in a dim community hall, a hollow echo of her curated dream, with only a handful of guests and Ryan's distant gaze. Her voicemail lingered unanswered on my phone, her voice trembling. Mom, I need to talk. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. James's words echoed. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Maggie. It's choosing peace over war. I'd chosen peace, not by erasing the hurt, but by standing tall in it. For those listening, here's what I've learned. Your worth isn't defined by who rejects you, but by how you hold yourself through the pain. Set boundaries, not to wound, but to protect the light you carry. Forgive, but don't forget the lessons carved in your scars. Keep a chair open for those who may return, but never shrink to fit their table. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Unwanted Revenge. Share your own moments of standing steady. Your words might light someone else's way. I walked back inside, the Napa night soft behind me, Sophia's photo glowing in its frame. The future wasn't a closed door. It was a path, unhurried, waiting for steps as steady as my own.